lineage, as Trungpa Rinpoche embodied it and as he taught it, is first of all based on communication between teacher and student. In his case, a communication between himself and those of us who were his students. And it's a certain way of seeing life, a certain way of experiencing life. Sometimes with him, I would be sitting in his sitting room, and I'm thinking particularly in 1979, we had a seminary, a 3-month seminary in Banff in northern Alberta, and extraordinarily beautiful place with huge mountains on the other side of a lake, and his sitting room was in the top of a hotel. And I remember sitting with him, and neither one of us was talking, and the window was open, and the breeze was coming in and just ruffling the curtains, and the sun was shining through the curtains and falling in patterns on the floor. And I remember, first of all, the utter openness and stillness. There was no thought, there was nothing, no ripple on the surface of the ocean of mind. And at the same time, there was the sunlight and the breeze rippling through the curtains. And it was so incredibly beautiful. It was a moment of such peace and such vividness. That's what a lineage is. And that's where the transmission occurs. It's a way of experiencing life. And of course, in all of the situations that we're in programs, in personal encounters, in our retreats, when we have a certain depth of experience of life, when we see things from a certain viewpoint, and we understand our own possibilities, that's when transmission occurs. When I sit with one of my students, and we're both looking at that student's life, and we're sort of sifting through to try to find out where the real vitality is, where the real individuality and creativity is. And there's a moment when we both see it, and suddenly the possibility of that person for a moment is actually real and present. That's transmission. That's when it happens. And that's really what lineage is. And then, of course, around that, certain things have happened. And I don't know if they need to, but they have historically, which is, for one thing, we develop a lot of practices to try to give us access to that experience of life. But the experience of life really happens between teacher and student. How profound can life be? How vast can it be? How open can it be? How interesting can it be? That is the core of transmission when we see that with our teacher and with our lineage and with our Sangha. So I must apologize for my cell phone that I didn't turn off, but I would like to continue talking about lineage at this point. So we have the what I've called the primordial lineage that I've been talking about, which is a sort of openness of mind and what occurs within it. And of course, when we talk about the meeting that happens between teacher and student, we also have to keep in mind we have the human teacher, where that meeting can occur and can be very powerful, a sort of mutual recognition. But we also have the symbolic teacher, which is the way in which the Dharma is communicated through situations and through things that happen to us. And then we have the ultimate teacher, which is our own mind, which is the insights that arise out of the darkness, so to speak. And all three of these are in harmony, and that's one of the interesting points about the Vajrayana, that the teaching principle or the Dharma that we need to hear comes to us from all different directions. It comes to us from this human person who is carrying the lineage for us, from situations and then from our own mind. And in all cases, the message is the same. It's always about the vastness of the person that we are and the call that we have to be fully and completely what we can be. That's the transmission, and that's what the lineage is. If we talked about becoming, Rinpoche talked a lot about we need to, um, we need to become fully who we are. That's an unusual way of speaking within Buddhism, as you know. Most Buddhist teachers and most Buddhist lineages frame things differently. And likewise with a lot of the other things that he talked about, they were unusual and not often heard. And I think the important point here is that all of that came out of his experience with his own teachers of what life could be and what life was at its basis. And also that's what is going on with us in Dharma Ocean. And it's interesting that the energy of the whole community is operating in fulfillment of that one thing, of the sacredness of our own person, and of needing to be a warrior, in a sense, needing to be brave to come into the fullness of what our life can be. And then, as I said before, so that's the primordial lineage. That's the true meaning of lineage, and that's the only one really that holds the center. And then we have the practices that we do, known as the transmission lineage, in order to give access to that kind of, fundamental experience of awakening, if you will. And these include the Hinayana, the Mahayana practices, and all the Vajrayana practices. And then we have the institutional lineage, which in our case is Dharma Ocean, and somebody is going to hold the institutional lineage, and it's not necessarily going to be me. It may be somebody else who has a responsibility for holding the institution. So we are sometimes confused by that, and we become confused. We think that if somebody has the titles and the deeds to the property, that somehow that confers spiritual authority and power, and it isn't true. We're children of the Roman Empire, which identifies institutionalization with spirituality, and that's, from the Buddhist point of view, it just doesn't work that way.